Flamer by Mike Curato was one of my favorite graphic novels I read in 2020. This one is partially based on the author's own experience as an Eagle Scout in the 1990s. But it's also partially fictionalized. So the main character, Aiden, is attending an Eagle Scout camp between middle and high school. And so he's sort of discovering himself. And he's gay, but he's been raised to think that being gay is a sin and that it's awful and that nobody will ever love him because he's gay. And meanwhile, he's at the summer camp. It should be a positive experience, but he's surrounded by camp counselors who aren't accepting of gay people. He's surrounded by peers who make awful homophobic slurs and constant homophobic jokes. And so he's really just, made to be uncomfortable in his own skin and with who he is. So the book art is amazing. And I loved the way that pretty much everything in the book is black and white until it gets to these like really intense, fiery, colorful moments. And I thought that was really creative. And I do have to warn people that there is some pretty harsh homophobic language in this book. And there's also some suicidal ideation. So, if you're uncomfortable with anything like that, you may want to think twice before picking this up. But otherwise, I thought this was one of the best, most artistically done graphic novels that I read in 2020, and also one of my favorite LGBTQ stories that came out this past year. So that's Flamer by Mike Curato. Displacement by Kiku Hughes was another one of my favorite graphic novels from 2020. This book is the story of a Japanese girl, and it's actually Kiku herself, who goes to San Francisco to visit the city and to find out about her family's history in the city. And she is whisked back to the 1940s and the Japanese internment camp that her grandmother was locked up in during World War II. And this is another really good companion book to They Called Us Enemy by George Takei that came out last year about the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II in the U.S. This one comes from a slightly older perspective and more of a familial kind of research. So the author actually researched, what her grandmother went through during World War II before she wrote this book. And so even though they've had their civil liberties stripped away, the people in the camps are still able to, forge some kind of a community. So it's kind of about that too, and what life was like in those internment camps. I really like the author's attention to detail in the artwork throughout this, so you get an idea of what the internment camps really looked like. And overall, it's just a really good book that examines, a painful incident from America's past, and then also ties that into the present day. So it's Displacement by Kiku Hughes, really great graphic novel, one of my favorites from 2020. If you ask me, this is one of the most important books that came out in 2020. It's called Stamped: Racism, Anti-Racism in You, and it's by Ibram X. Kendi and remixed by Jason Reynolds. If you have not read anything by Jason Reynolds yet, I highly recommend you do it. Go out and get all of his books, read them as fast as you can. You're just really missing out. He's an excellent author. And this book was originally written by Ibram X. Kendi, and it was geared towards adults. But Jason Reynolds has just kind of done what he calls a remix and put it into kind of more of a conversational, youth-oriented tone. And so in the foreword of the book, the author says that, dear reader, to know the past is to know the present, and to know the present is to know yourself. I write about the history of racism to understand racism today. I want to understand racism today to understand how it is affecting me today. And I want you to understand racism today to understand how it is affecting you in America today. So this book, he stresses that even though it has history in it, it is not a history book. This book is actually about the present and the lives that we're living in the here and now. And he just talks about how the history of racist ideas and racist policy ever since the inception of the United States kind of inform what we're going through nowadays. And he talks about how there are three basic groups. There are assimilationists, segregationists, and then there are anti-racists. And so he talks about the importance of kind of training your brain and training yourself to be a strong anti-racist so that we can overcome this, so that we can create a society that is actually equal and that is actually equitable. I think this book, honestly, should probably be required reading for pretty much everybody, both adults and teenagers alike. And once again, it's stamped Racism, Anti-Racism, and You by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi.